Hello, everybody. I am here on a new platform, as you can see. It's a video platform, obviously. I think it's going to work out pretty good. I do. I was a little hesitant at first to do this because I don't like my face being on, you know, where I can see it. But I've come to the conclusion that YouTube is probably the way to go. And the only way you can get any kind of notoriety, well, not notoriety, but attention at all, is to have some kind of video. Audio is great, but for the most part, that's yesterday's news. So anyway, I've made the transition, and the picture you're seeing right now will, and all of the everything that's included on the screen will get better as we go along, because the technology, it's a little tough to break through, especially for an old guy like me. If I was 40 years younger, it'd work a lot better. If I grew up with technology, it's one thing, but you're talking about a guy that used to use pen and paper at school. So you know, I'm just surprised I got this far. So I hope it works out, and I hope you like it. It will get better as we go along. I'll always be trying to improve it. I'll try to get it to a point where I can play a video on screen while I'm talking. Just like the pros do. It's really not that hard. It's just learning the process. And again, I've I've run into some snags. Uh, Technology. It's pretty much. I guess technology is pretty much run by teenagers. If you know what I mean. It's, everybody I see on YouTube that's explaining how to do these things are in their 20s. So you can see my problem. So bear with me as we go on this journey. Uh, what I'm going to try to do on a daily basis is to do at least one podcast and make it probably 12 to 15 minutes long, and hopefully I'll make 3 of them a day if I can, if I find the time. Because what I'm trying to do with this technology, the program that you use, it's a lot simpler. So hopefully a lot of the time factor will crunch down, so I don't have to spend as much time doing it, and more time in front of the camera instead of behind it. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. Today I wanted to talk about a couple of things. First of all, the port strike, the U.S. port strike. And the reason I want to talk about it is because it is historic, folks. This is going to be a big deal. If this goes on, if this lasts for any longer than a couple of days, and even if it's a couple of days, it's going to disrupt supply chains around the country. You're going to see shelves go bare. You're going to see produce be scarce and very expensive. The last thing the United States can use right now is a bump in inflation, but I think you're going to see it. I think you're going to see it, and if it continues on, it's going to get worse and worse. I've seen some people saying that this is not as big a deal as it's people are making it out to be. Folks, I can tell you for a fact, it's going to be a very big deal if this continues on. And I mean, the government's. I don't think the government's going to step in. I don't think Biden's got the balls to do this to instigate the Taft-Hartley Act. I don't think he's got the guts to do that. For one thing, it makes Kamala Harris look bad, and the fact that he hates her guts, I think this is playing right into his hand. So I don't know that that'll happen. It may change, but even if it goes on for a week, it's going to be devastating to the U.S. economy. Uh, you're talking about what? What did they say? I heard 36 ports up and down the eastern seaboard and the Gulf Coast, all the way from Maine to Texas. 45,000 port workers are on strike. Now, when 45,000 port workers go on strike, that has a domino effect. There will be truck drivers that won't be working. There will be secondary industries that won't be working. It's going to really affect the country as a whole. Now, is it necessary? Well, it's a first strike since 1977 for the longshoremen. Uh, does that mean it's warranted? I don't know. Look, I worked for a union, and I was a union member for 20 years. And I've had this discussion with many, many people. A lot of people around the country hate unions. They think they're a deterrent. They think they're bad for the country. Um, I'm not one of those. I understand where they're coming from. Unions have their positive and their negatives, just like anything else in the world. But are they a necessary evil? And I would say yes, because I've worked for a union, a huge union, by the way, one of the largest package moving companies in the world. I worked for them for 20 years. I worked for them, and then I've worked for companies who did not have a union. In one instance, I worked for a family operation. That was not a problem. You had representation because you could talk to the owner. You could go right up and knock on their door and discuss a problem you've got. Then I worked for the other largest package moving company in the world. And you would know them. It's not the post office, but they're non union. Okay? Let's just say it wasn't my finest hours of my working history. Okay? Now, why was that? Well, for one thing, you had no representation. You've heard the old saying, only a crazy man goes into court without a lawyer. What's the first thing a criminal does when he's been arrested? He asks for a lawyer. What's he doing? He's asking for representation, for protection. That's what he's doing. Now, when I worked for the company that was non-union, I didn't have any of that. Now, these are very simple terms we're talking here. You can dig down into this and you can find all of the corruption that goes on in the unions. I'm just talking about my personal experience in this. Working for a non-union operation, not as good as working for a union operation. You usually make around 30% less per hour. Benefits are less. Now, why is that? Well, the reason that is because they can get away with it. Because you have no representation, you have no organization, you have no ability to strike back at the company when they do something wrong. If they're treating you badly, what recourse do you have? Well, in a non-union situation, you have none. All you can do is quit. That's basically it. So when people badmouth the union, I've seen thread after thread of this, even on some platforms that I thought people were relatively intelligent. I've seen some rantings about unions. Now, one of the things they do, and I saw it in several of these posts, comments about the teachers union, and I agree with that to a certain degree. The teachers union is a bad thing. It is corrupt. It protects the jerk, the lazy person. It's running the educational system. I'll grant you that. I'll grant you that. But does that mean that we should do away with unions completely? Because that's the kind of what everyone's saying. They're saying that this is a massive blow to the American economy, and that the union members are the ones who are at fault. They make plenty of money. They're asking for a huge amount. And if you know how negotiations work, that's just the way you do it. So I dismiss that kind of language. But at the end of the day, are unions good? Well, there's two sides to that, obviously. Even being a union member, I would say yes and no. I mean, you get into these arguments, and actually, you look at historically, the mafia has been involved with the unions. You had Jimmy Hoffa, a lot of corruption, a lot of people taking money directly from the membership. That's true. That's absolutely 100% accurate. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, and I am not, under any circumstances, saying that the union is as pure as a driven snow, because they're not. Okay? But I will say this: organized labor overall has been a positive for the United States and for the American worker. Because without that, you would not have a 40-hour work week. Without organized labor, you would not have time and a half for overtime. You would not have any of those. You would not have paid holidays. You would not have paid vacation, at least not as much as you have today. You would not have health insurance. Your job security would be, your job would be at risk almost daily without the unions. Now in Missouri, it's a little bit different because you can get fired for no reason in Missouri. Now, is that fair? Well, it isn't, but if you're in a union, that law does not apply. You have to go through the process. So in Missouri, as a union member, I was protected from just being fired just because they wanted to do it. You had no, in a non-union situation, you have no contract. You have nothing that they have to live up to, that the company has to live up to. So in that sense, I was protected. Now, what else? Child labor laws. You've got OSHA and safety. Can you imagine what your working life would look like right now? I don't know what you do for a living, but it doesn't really matter because there are OSHA and safety regulations in any industry you're in, any industry. Imagine if there was no union that pushed for those safety regulations to be followed through with. What if they could do anything at your work, and your safety was not even a consideration? Where do you think that all came from? It came from organized labor. How about this? How about retirement? Retirement. People say, well, most people don't have retirements anymore. That's true. That's true. But who do you think was responsible for the implementation of the 401k? Who do you think was involved in that? Do you think that the companies as a whole just decided that, hey, we think it'd be a good thing to take some of our money and give it to our workers so that they can retire later on when they get to retirement age? You think that actually would happen? Of course not. Of course not. Without organized labor asking for it, it would have never happened. So when I hear these belly achers and these complainers complaining about organized labor and the unions, I have to say stop and think about this for a second. Without unions in the United States, without organized labor, there would be no middle class. There wouldn't be. There wouldn't be. There would be people who own companies, and there would be the very poor. And the very poor would have to work for those companies for whatever pay scale they put out. Why is it you think? It's funny. People think that they have never benefited from anything the union has done or organized labor. They have. They have. Even if you don't work for even if you don't work for a company that has a union, you've benefited from it. Just sheer competition for workers. I mean, if you've got two companies, let's say, that make widgets in a town, Company A is paying $10 an hour. Okay, Company B is paying $15 an hour. Where do you think most people are going to go and apply to make the widgets? They're going to go to Company B. Company A is going to have to raise their starting wage in order to compete. Now, say they both have the same pay scale, both paying $12 an hour, and these numbers these numbers are meaningless. The point is, say they're paying the same amount of wage. Company B decides, hey, we're going to give people, instead of 2 weeks vacation, we're going to give them 3. Where is the labor going to migrate to? They're going to migrate to Company B. Company A is going to have to change their policies, or they're not going to have any workers. You see where I'm getting at? You see what I'm saying here? You follow me? Because I understand where people are coming from. Organized labor can be corrupt, but you don't disband it and do away with it and do away with the unions just because of maybe an isolated incident. You don't do that. If you worked that way, if things worked that way, you would have no airline industry. Okay, and I know that's a strange example, but no airline industry. You would have done away with it after the first crash. Yes, a crash in an airline is devastating. It kills hundreds. There's no doubt about that. It's horrible. It's devastating. But you don't shut the entire industry down because of one. Because airline travel has been, it has contributed to so many things in America. It's put us into the 21st century. You just don't throw it away because of one bad apple. You just don't do it. You've heard the old saying, you don't throw the whole cart out because of one bad apple. You don't do that. Same thing here. Now, the 45,000 port workers, I guess they went on strike at 14 major ports after talks broke down with the United States Maritime Alliance. I thought it was 36, but whatever. Nonetheless, they're asking for a 77% increase in pay. Seems quite exorbitant, doesn't it? Seems like, man, I mean, and these guys probably are starting out $80,000, $90,000 a year. Valid point. Valid point. Now, this Harold Daggett, I believe is his name. He's the president of the union. Yeah. He's asking for a 77% increase over 6 years. Now, that seems high. Okay. But in negotiations, that's the way you go in. You're asked high, you negotiate, you find some middle ground. Cost of living has gone up almost 25% since 2020. So I can see this. These guys have not been on strike since 1977. They're worried about automation. Automation. The West Coast allowed automation to come into their port system. They ended up laying off 18,000 dock workers. Now, most people would say, well, that's progress. That's just something you have to put up with. Is it? Is it really? Because who are you going to sell your products to if these people aren't making money? And look what happened to the car industry. Seriously, think of the people and the jobs that just disappeared over automation. Now, am I saying that we should remain in the 1930s as far as technology? No, I'm not. But there has to be some give and take on this. You can't automate an entire industry. You just can't. You can't. Look what happened in in Philadelphia when that boat ran into the bridge. What was it? This Francis Scott Key Bridge. A lot of that had to do with automation. Those failures had to do with automation. So automation is not always a good thing. And in this instance, I think personally, I believe that the workers have a point here. They do not want to lose their job any more than anyone else does. So when people badmouth the unions and what's going on right now, you have to look at it. You have to look at it from a position that not taking sides particularly, because at the end of the day, they're actually protecting everyone's jobs, because this is coming to every industry. It is. Automation is the thing. AI. This all has to be addressed at some point. It all has to be addressed at some point. I don't know where it's going to go, and I don't know where it's going to stop. But you and I both know that people have to work. They have to have an income. And if you don't have incomes, then industry as a whole goes away. All right. Anyway, that's all I got to say today, because I'm already over my allotted time. I'm 19 and a half minutes. So we will talk again tomorrow. All right. You have a good day. If you're seeing this or you're looking at this on YouTube, be sure and like this video and subscribe. And, I hate to be one of those guys that begs for that, but I'd appreciate it. So, all right. That's all I got. See you later.